How do? I'm Chris. Welcome to King Bespoke Creations. I am a long-term user and lover of pyrography, the art of burning wood with a hot tip pen. Effectively, a soldering iron, but a bit fancier. However, I was recently contacted by a viewer asking on my opinion on a scorch pen. What's a scorch pen? I asked. It turns out it's a pen that actually scorches. Who'd have thought? So I went straight onto Amazon and bought this Scorch kit. So included in the kit is a Scorch pen, which has a thin tip and a fat tip. It has some Scorch paste that you can spread around, and a couple of extra bits like some sandpaper, some rubber gloves, and quite nicely, 2 blocks of beeswax. Now, that's a lovely package, but how does it all work? What's the difference between the pyrography and the Scorch? And is one better than the other? Let's find out. Now let's start with the pyrography. So here I have the main switch in the middle that turns everything on, and I have 2 separate pens attached with different nibs on. Now you can spend a lot of money on a pyrography kit. This one isn't. It's about £60–70. You can spend a lot more. Or you can get something that is effectively just a soldering iron that gets a hot tip and you just burn the wood. The major benefit of a system like this one is that you can turn the temperature up and down to change how deep and how strong the burn's going to be. And these nibs heat up a lot quicker and, more importantly, cool down a lot quicker than your standard soldering iron type. Now, I'll quite often use a chunk of plywood. Something with just an even face on it is what you need. So the longer you hold the nib still, the more it will burn and the blacker that section will become. Then if you kind of splay it out, you can get some really cool shading. So you can go quickly and lightly to try and gently shade things down, or you can hold it on and get something completely different. Fairly wide areas, or you can do really thin lines. And it's amazing what you can get out of just one nib. Now, over the years, I've done lots of different pyrography pictures, and it takes time, and it's actually a very relaxing hobby. If you just need time to chill out and just create something lovely, pyrography might just be the new hobby for you. I really do enjoy it. However, it does have its limitations. On open grain wood, especially something like pine, you can find that it burns really quickly on the light soft stuff and then takes a little longer on the harder stuff. So in between those layers of grains, it becomes very inconsistent. It's also quite tricky to do things like lettering, because lettering needs to be very, very precise and it needs to be held at an exact rate. The pyrography is quite tricky to do because it's very pressure and time sensitive. Brilliant for artistic flares, not so fantastic for constant precision. So how are these Scorch wood burning pens any different? Well, firstly, they don't burn with heat. These burn with chemicals. So you draw on the wood just like you do with a normal pen. You can do any pattern you want, and actually it works as freely as a pen. I'm really randomly doing something strange here, but just to prove you can just draw with it with a pen. Now, what I don't know is if this can do any shading of any sort. Now, that doesn't look like that's burnt very much to me, but this is activated with heat. Now, you are supposed to use a heat gun at this point, but I don't have one, so I'm just going to use a blowtorch. Obviously being very careful not to set your workshop on fire. So we can see with the instant addition of heat, whatever marks I've put down go black. And other than inside the tiny grains where the pen ink didn't go in, you do get an extremely consistent result throughout, regardless of whether it's soft or hard grain. To prove it, let's see what happens on the pine. A little bit more consistent result on the pine using that chemical burn. but you can still see the wood grain through it, which I think is a jolly good thing, because we are burning onto wood as a specific thing. Otherwise, you may as well just do it all on paper. So what about the paste then? What's that all about? Well, I think the clue's in the box, in that there's a spreader. So it's all about the use of stencils. So here I have my logo cut out. Oh, take the lid off to reveal the stuff underneath. Strange consistency. So apparently you don't need a lot. It's just trying to squeegee the stuff on, making sure you get into all the corners. So even with that tiny amount, there's still a bit left over. If we then remove that, yeah, so like with all stencils, you need to be careful as you're spreading it, because as soon as it splays out from the edges, if you get it underneath your stencil, it's going to leak. But I can't really blame the paste for that. That's my clumsiness, isn't it? I haven't even applied heat to this yet, and you can see how dark that's going. Now, my little concern is the excess paste that's on there. So you can't just wipe that off while it's still wet, because that will just spread like it has done underneath the stencil. Does that excess paste disappear once you apply heat to it? We can see there how the excess does bubble a little bit. So what happens if we move that around? That is bone dry, so that, yeah, so that does come off there. I might use a trusty blade to scrape off the excess. While the wood's still warm, we can actually just rub in a layer of the beeswax to allow that to soak in. Now, one thing I am interested in is whether with this Scorch paste, or the pen in fact, whether it's possible to do any kind of shading. Is it just black or not black? Can you get any kind of effect in between? So we've brought back our scrap piece of pine, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to colour in a fairly big block with it, some parts of it completely filled in and some parts left as individual strands. And on this side, I'm going to use a little bit of paper cloth, so a lot less than we had with this scraper with the logo. I'm just going to rub that in so there is no excess paste anywhere. It's quite difficult to see where we've rubbed. Now, what I'm going to say at this point is get these right out of the way before your heat gun comes out. So you can see as we apply the heat, it is changing colour. I'm trying to keep it moving so it doesn't blacken one stage. There it goes. Right, interesting. So the paste takes a little bit of time to get that working, and I think that's because it was a really wafer thin layer of paste. If we put it on with the paper towel, there's such a little amount of it on there that it takes a little bit longer to burn. So I think you might be able to then have a little bit of shading possible. Whereas even going nowhere near the pen marking with the heat gun, it's all gone jet black straight away. So I don't think with the pen any shading is possible at all. Now I'll point out here that this isn't where I've just burnt it with the blowtorch. You can see it's very definitely taken off where the paste was originally, and you can make it darker on this section and a little bit lighter on this section. I think actually if you were going to go for a Shosugiban look, the completely torched look, using a wafer thin layer of this paste might just make that a little bit easier, and to get that look that you want without actually burning the wood with the blowtorch for a long time. So I've now spent a little bit of time with each of these techniques, one with a Scorch pen and one with a Pyrography pen, even trying to recreate the same picture with one and the other. So as I was working through, I found that the Scorch pens work very quickly. You can get a picture down very, very quickly. It's very quick and efficient, but the detail is lacking a little bit. That pen is an absolute. It's exactly the same as just using a black felt tip pen. It gives you the same instance straight away. It's black, it's black, it's black. There's no shading. The paste, however, can definitely be manipulated with varying amounts of heat. Now I found that very, very useful for shading in, so we can have very black at the front edge of the picture, fading out to lighter towards the back. With the Pyrography, you can certainly get a heck of a lot more detail going on there. The shading can be done a little bit more precisely, but that constant black that you might want is very difficult to do in a constant state. So we end up with these two different pictures that actually look very similar, but very, very different. So final verdict, is one better than the other? Well, I think, to be honest, they're not really a comparison. It's like comparing pencils to paints. They're a completely different medium. If you're writing letters, if you want to flow nicely, then I think the Scorch pen will work really well. Similarly, if you want to do stencil work and repeated work, then I think the Scorch pen, especially the paste as well for that, is definitely going to be the better option. If you want that more artistic flair, the variation, the nuanced detail, then the Pyrography pen I think is the one for you. Can we combine the two? Do you know what? Yeah, I think I might do. That Scorch paste is really good at getting great long flat areas that can be shaded. Then maybe going with the detail in with the Pyrography. Future thought, I think. Now I'm going to leave some affiliate links in the description if you want to try and get your hands on either of these or both. And while you're waiting for the post to arrive, watch this video here and get some fantastic Pyrography tips while you're on. Until next time, I'll see you soon. God bless. Bye bye.